The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Kensington Palace as Prince William stepped out of the main building, adjusting his casual blazer. It was supposed to be a quiet Tuesday, one of those rare days when his official calendar showed only internal meetings and family time. The kind of day he treasured more than any state dinner or ribbon-cutting ceremony. His protection officer, Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews, walked a respectful distance behind him as they made their way toward the garage block. Sarah had been part of William's security detail for 3 years now, and she knew his routines better than most. Today's plan was simple: a private drive to visit a local children's hospital that wasn't expecting him. These unannounced visits had become William's way of connecting with people without the usual media circus. The garage housed several vehicles, from the official Range Rovers with their reinforced panels and bulletproof glass to Catherine's more modest Audi that she used for school runs. William had requested something low-key for today's outing, something that wouldn't immediately scream royal convoy to anyone paying attention. The blue BMW should work perfectly, Your Royal Highness, Sarah suggested, pointing to a vehicle that looked like any other executive car you might see in London traffic. It's been serviced and cleared by our technical team yesterday. William nodded, appreciating Sarah's attention to detail. She had a reputation for being thorough, perhaps overly so, according to some of his staff, but William valued that quality. In a world where threats could come from anywhere, having someone who checked and double-checked everything gave him peace of mind. As they approached the BMW, Sarah performed her standard routine. She walked around the vehicle, checking for anything unusual, running her hands along the wheel wells and bumpers. It might have seemed paranoid to an outsider, but this level of caution had prevented problems before. Just 6 months ago, she had discovered a tracking device attached to one of the vehicles by an overzealous tabloid photographer. The car appeared completely normal. British racing green with cream leather interior, it was elegant but understated. Exactly what William preferred for his private outings. Sarah unlocked the doors using the key fob and gave the interior a quick visual inspection. Everything looked standard. Clean seats, fresh air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror, and the usual collection of items you'd expect in any well-maintained vehicle. William slid into the driver's seat, something he didn't get to do nearly often enough. Usually, he was relegated to the back seat while protection officers handled the driving. But for local trips like this, especially when trying to maintain a low profile, he preferred to drive himself. It felt more normal, more human. The hospital visit should take about 2 hours, William said as Sarah settled into the passenger seat. I want to see the new children's wing they've been working on, and meet some of the young patients if possible. Sarah nodded, already mentally reviewing the route and backup plans. I've coordinated with the local police. They'll maintain a discreet presence around the hospital, but nothing obvious. The hospital staff has been briefed to treat this as a private visit. As William started the engine, he noticed the fuel gauge showing nearly empty. Strange, since all royal vehicles were supposed to be kept fueled and ready at all times. But perhaps someone had used the car recently and forgotten to fill it up. We should stop for petrol, he mentioned to Sarah, who immediately pulled out her phone to locate the nearest station that had been pre-approved for royal visits. Security protocols meant they couldn't just stop at any random petrol station. Every location had to be assessed for potential risks. There's a Shell station about 10 minutes away that we've used before, Sarah said after checking her secure database. Clean security rating, good sight lines, and the owner has been vetted. As they drove through the London streets, William felt the familiar sense of freedom that came with these unplanned moments. The weight of royal duties seemed lighter when he could simply be a man driving to help sick children. Even if it was never quite that simple with security protocols and advanced planning, the petrol station appeared ahead, looking exactly like thousands of others across Britain. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from the control room, confirming that the location had been given a security all-clear just an hour ago. Everything was proceeding according to plan. William pulled up to the pump farthest from the main road, position that Sarah had specifically requested for better security coverage. As he got out to fuel the car, Sarah remained alert, her eyes constantly scanning the area for anything unusual. A few other customers were going about their business, completely unaware that royalty was pumping petrol just meters away. That's when William realized he had left his wallet in another jacket. A common enough problem for anyone, but slightly more complicated when you're a prince surrounded by security protocols. Sarah immediately offered to pay, but William waved her off with a smile. "Check the glove box," he suggested. "There's usually some emergency cash in these cars." Sarah leaned across from her seat and popped open the glove compartment. What she expected to find was the usual collection of items: vehicle registration documents, insurance papers, perhaps some coins for parking meters, and maybe a small emergency fund that staff sometimes kept for situations. Exactly like this, what she actually found made her freeze completely. Her training kicked in immediately, and she felt her hand instinctively move toward the radio clip to her belt. This was not what anyone expected to discover during a routine fuel stop. Inside the glove box, nestled among the perfectly ordinary documents and maps, was something that should not have been there. Something that changed everything about this quiet Tuesday morning and would soon involve multiple security agencies. Senior palace officials, in a very serious investigation into how such an item had ended up in a royal vehicle. Sarah's mind raced through protocols and procedures as she stared at the contents of the glove compartment. This discovery would need to be handled with extreme care, discretion, and immediate action. The peaceful hospital visit they had planned was about to become something entirely different. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the object nestled in the glove compartment. Among the expected vehicle documents and emergency supplies lay a small rectangular device that she immediately recognized from her extensive security training. It was a sophisticated listening device, no bigger than a matchbox. With a tiny blinking red light that indicated it was actively recording, the implications hit her immediately. Someone had placed surveillance equipment inside a royal vehicle. This wasn't just a security breach. It was a potential national security threat that could involve everything from industrial espionage to foreign intelligence gathering. Her years of training with the Metropolitan Police's Specialist Protection Unit had prepared her for many scenarios. But finding a bug in Prince William's car during a casual fuel stop wasn't one of them. "Your Royal Highness," Sarah said quietly, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "We need to step away from the vehicle immediately." William, who had been watching the fuel pump numbers climb, turned to look at her. He could see the tension in her posture and the seriousness in her expression. Sarah wasn't someone who overreacted to situations, so when she spoke with that particular tone, he knew to listen. He asked, automatically following her lead as she guided him. Several steps away from the car, Sarah activated her radio with practiced efficiency. "Control, this is Sierra 7. We have a code red situation at our current location. I need an immediate response team and technical support." The radio crackled to life instantly. "Sierra 7, confirm code red. What is the nature of the threat?" "Surveillance device discovered in the primary vehicle. Unknown duration of placement? Unknown origin? Requesting immediate extraction and investigation protocols." William felt his stomach drop. A surveillance device in his car meant that someone had been listening to his private conversations, possibly for days or weeks. Every discussion he'd had while driving, every phone call made on the car's Bluetooth system, every personal moment with Catherine or the children during family outings could have been compromised. Within minutes, the peaceful petrol station was quietly transformed into a security operation. Unmarked vehicles arrived with personnel who looked like ordinary civilians, but moved with the precision of highly trained specialists. The station manager, a middle-aged man named David, was discreetly approached by one of the response team members and briefed on the need for cooperation without causing public alarm. Detective Chief Inspector James Morrison arrived personally to oversee the situation. Morrison was the head of the Royalty Protection Unit, a man with 25 years of experience in law enforcement and a spotless record of keeping the royal family safe. He had dealt with everything from assassination attempts to stalkers, but surveillance devices in royal vehicles represented a particularly serious breach. "Sarah, excellent work spotting this," Morrison said as he examined the device through the open glove compartment without touching it. "Technical team is en route. We'll need to treat this entire vehicle as a crime scene until we understand how long this has been active and what information might have been gathered. The technical specialists arrived in an unmarked van equipped with the latest electronic surveillance detection equipment. They were part of a joint unit between MI5 and the Metropolitan Police. Experts in counter-surveillance operations who dealt with threats to national security on a daily basis. Lead technician Dr. Emily Chen began her examination using specialized equipment that could detect electronic signatures and determine the device's capabilities without activating any potential self-destruct mechanisms. Some surveillance devices were designed to erase their memory or even damage surrounding electronics if tampered with improperly. This is a sophisticated piece of equipment, Dr. Chen reported after her initial assessment. Professional grade, not something you'd buy at an electronics shop. It's been modified to integrate with the vehicle's electrical system, which suggests whoever installed it had detailed knowledge of automotive electronics. The implications were troubling. This wasn't the work of a random stalker or overeager journalist. Someone with significant technical expertise and access to the royal vehicles had deliberately installed surveillance equipment. The question was whether it was the work of a lone actor, an organized criminal group, or something more serious involving foreign intelligence services. Prince William listened to the technical discussion with growing concern. How long could this have been in the car? He asked. Dr. Chen consulted her equipment readings. Based on the integration with the vehicle's systems and the wear patterns on the connections, I'd estimate anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks. We'll know more once we can properly analyze the device in a secure facility. 6 weeks. William's mind raced through all the conversations that had taken place in that car during the past month and a half. Discussions about family security, private conversations with Catherine about the children's education, sensitive briefings from palace officials about upcoming engagements. If all of that had been recorded and transmitted to unknown parties, the security implications were enormous. Morrison was already coordinating with multiple agencies. I've notified the Palace Security Office, and they're conducting immediate sweeps of all other royal vehicles. MI5 is being briefed on the potential intelligence implications, and we're treating this as a possible threat to national security until proven otherwise. The petrol station continued operating normally around them, with most customers completely unaware that a major security operation was taking place just meters away. The response team had been trained to conduct these operations without creating public spectacles that could attract media attention or panic. Sarah remained close to Prince William, continuously scanning the area for any signs of surveillance or threats. The discovery of the device meant that their security had been compromised. They couldn't assume this was an isolated incident. Someone had been watching and listening, and that someone might still be nearby. We need to get you to a secure location, Morrison told William. Until we understand the scope of this breach, we're implementing enhanced security protocols. A secure Range Rover from the backup protection detail arrived to transport William back to Kensington Palace. The BMW would remain at the petrol station until the technical team could completely process it as evidence. Every surface would be examined for fingerprints, DNA evidence, and any other clues that might identify who had installed the surveillance device as they prepared to leave. William couldn't shake the feeling that this discovery was just the beginning. Someone had gone to considerable effort to monitor his private conversations, and the professional nature of the equipment suggested this wasn't a simple privacy invasion. It was something much more serious, with implications that could affect not just his personal security, but potentially national security as well. The quiet hospital visit he had planned was forgotten. Instead, Liam found himself heading back to the palace for emergency security briefings and the beginning of what would likely be a complex investigation into how royal security had been compromised. The secure conference room beneath Kensington Palace buzzed with controlled tension as senior security officials gathered for an emergency briefing. The room lined with signal-blocking materials and swept daily for surveillance devices. It was one of the few places where sensitive discussions about royal security could take place without fear of electronic eavesdropping. Prince William sat at the head of the polished oak table, flanked by Detective Chief Inspector Morrison and Private Secretary Simon Case. Around them sat representatives from MI5, the Metropolitan Police Counterterrorism Unit, and the Palace Security Office. The gravity of the situation was reflected in the seniority of the officials who had dropped everything to attend this hastily arranged meeting. Dr. Emily Chen, the technical specialist who had examined the surveillance device, connected her laptop to the room's secure display system. "The device we discovered is a BTX-7 surveillance unit," she began, her voice steady despite the serious implications of her findings. "These are manufactured by a company called TechSecure Solutions, which supplies equipment primarily to government agencies and private security firms." She clicked to the next slide, showing detailed technical specifications. "The unit is capable of recording audio within a 10-meter radius with crystal clarity, even filtering out engine noise and road sounds. It can store up to 200 hours of recordings and transmit data via encrypted cellular signals to remote servers." William felt a chill as he realized the sophistication of the surveillance. This wasn't some amateur operation using basic recording equipment. Someone had invested significant resources in monitoring his private conversations with military-grade technology. MI5 section head David Blackwood leaned forward, his expression grim. "TechSecure Solutions requires extensive background checks and government authorization before selling this type of equipment. We're currently investigating their sales records for the past year, but preliminary inquiries suggest this particular unit was reported stolen from a government facility 6 months ago. The implications were troubling. Either someone had inside access to high-level surveillance equipment, or there was a broader security breach that extended beyond the Royal Protection Services." Morrison consulted his tablet before speaking. "We've completed preliminary sweeps of all other royal vehicles and found no additional devices. However, we're expanding the search to include all palace facilities and residences." Catherine entered the room at that moment, having been briefed separately about the situation. She took a seat beside William, her face showing the strain of learning that their family's privacy had been violated. As parents of 3 young children, the idea that strangers had been listening to their most intimate family moments was deeply disturbing. "What exactly could they have heard?" Catherine asked, her voice carefully controlled. Dr. Chen consulted her technical analysis. "Based on the device's activation patterns and our preliminary examination of its memory storage, it appears to have been actively recording during vehicle operation for approximately 5 weeks. That would include any conversations that took place while the car was running, as well as phone calls made through the vehicle's Bluetooth system." William's mind raced through the conversations that might have been compromised. Discussions about the children's security arrangements, private family matters, and sensitive information about upcoming royal engagements that hadn't been made public. Even worse, there had been several occasions when palace officials had briefed him in the car about matters of national importance. Blackwood pulled up a classified file on his secure tablet. "We're treating this as a potential threat to national security. The timing of the surveillance coincides with several sensitive diplomatic initiatives that His Royal Highness has been involved with, including the upcoming trade delegation to Southeast Asia and discussions about Commonwealth security cooperation." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications. If foreign intelligence services had been monitoring William's conversations, they could have gained advanced knowledge of British diplomatic strategies, trade negotiations, and security arrangements that could be extremely valuable to hostile nations. Palace security. Chief Margaret Wells spoke up for the first time. "We've initiated a comprehensive review of all personnel who had access to the vehicle in question. The BMW was serviced 3 times in the past 2 months, and we're investigating everyone who came into contact with it during those visits." She pulled up a personnel file on the main display. "The most concerning possibility is Thomas Hartley, an automotive technician who worked on several royal vehicles, including the BMW. He left his position at the approved service facility 2 weeks ago under suspicious circumstances, claiming he had received a better job offer. However, attempts to contact him at his listed address have been unsuccessful." Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews, who had discovered the device, felt a sense of validation. Her thorough security checks and attention to detail had prevented what could have been a much larger intelligence disaster. "Has there been any analysis of what information was actually transmitted?" she asked. Dr. Chen shook her head. The device uses sophisticated encryption, and we're still working to break the transmission protocols. We know data was being sent to servers outside the UK, but we haven't been able to determine the final destination or access the content of what was transmitted. Morrison stood up, moving to a map of London displayed on one of the room's screens. We've identified several cellular towers that received transmissions from the device over the past 5 weeks. The signals were routed through multiple countries before reaching their final destination, which appears to be somewhere in Eastern Europe, though we can't be more specific at this point. The mention of Eastern Europe caused concerned glances around the room. Several nations in that region had been increasingly aggressive in their intelligence, gathering operations against Western governments, and the professional nature of the surveillance equipment suggested state-level resources. Prince William finally spoke, his voice reflecting both anger and determination. What are our next steps? How do we prevent this from happening again? And how do we find out who is behind this? Blackwood consulted his notes. MI5 is coordinating with international partners to trace the data transmissions and identify the parties responsible. We're also conducting a comprehensive security review of all royal protection protocols to identify potential vulnerabilities, Wells added. In the immediate term, we're implementing enhanced security measures for all royal vehicles. Every car will undergo daily electronic sweeps, and we're installing detection systems that will alert us to any unauthorized electronic devices. The meeting continued for another hour, covering everything from potential diplomatic implications to media management strategies. The discovery of the surveillance device had opened up questions about the security of the entire royal family, and answering those questions would require coordination between multiple intelligence agencies and law enforcement organizations. As the briefing concluded, William realized that this incident had fundamentally changed how he would need to approach his daily life. The assumption of privacy that he had taken for granted, even in his own vehicles, had been shattered. Every conversation, every phone call, every family moment would now need to be considered through the lens of potential surveillance. The quiet hospital visit he had planned that morning seemed like something from another world. Instead of comforting sick children, he was dealing with the reality that unknown enemies had been listening to his most private moments for weeks. 3 days after the discovery, the investigation had expanded into a full-scale counterintelligence operation. In a secure facility in Thames House, MI5's headquarters, analysts worked around the clock to decrypt the intercepted data transmissions and trace their ultimate destination. The surveillance device had been more sophisticated than initially thought, containing multiple layers of encryption that suggested military-grade intelligence capabilities. Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews found herself at the center of the investigation, working alongside MI5 specialists who rarely collaborated with local police on such sensitive matters. Her discovery of the device had marked her as someone with exceptional attention to detail, and her insights into royal security protocols were proving invaluable to the investigation. "We've made a breakthrough," announced Dr. Chen as she entered the secure briefing room where the investigation team had been working since dawn. The encryption on the surveillance device included a unique digital signature that we've been able to match against known intelligence tools used by foreign services. Connected her laptop to the secure display system, bringing up complex technical diagrams. That meant little to most of the assembled officials, but clearly excited the technical specialists. The signature matches equipment that we've previously identified as being used by the SVR, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. This isn't the work of criminals or amateur spies. We're dealing with a state-sponsored intelligence operation. The revelation sent ripples of concern through the room. Russian intelligence services had been increasingly bold in their operations against Western targets, but placing surveillance equipment in royal vehicles represented a significant escalation that could have diplomatic implications far beyond the immediate security concerns. DOT MI5 section head Blackwood pulled up a classified file on his secure terminal. This aligns with intelligence we've been receiving about increased Russian interest in British diplomatic and trade initiatives. The timing of the surveillance coincides with several sensitive negotiations where advance Knowledge of British positions could provide significant advantages. Meanwhile, at Kensington Palace, Prince William was briefing his wife on the latest developments. Catherine had insisted on knowing everything about the investigation, particularly given the implications for their children's security. They sat in William's private study, one of the few rooms in the palace that was regularly swept for surveillance devices and considered completely secure for sensitive conversations. The good news is that they've identified who is likely responsible, William explained, showing Catherine the briefing documents he had been given. The concerning news is that it appears to be connected to Russian intelligence services, which suggests this was part of a much larger operation. Catherine studied the documents with the careful attention she had learned to apply to security briefings. As a member of the royal family, she had received extensive training in recognizing and responding to security threats. But the idea that foreign spies had been listening to their private family conversations still felt surreal. "What about Thomas Hartley, the technician who went missing?" she asked. William consulted his notes. "They found him yesterday. He's been taken into custody and is being questioned by counterintelligence specialists. Apparently, he was recruited several months ago and offered substantial payments to install surveillance equipment in vehicles he was servicing." The investigation into Hartley had revealed a troubling pattern. The automotive technician, who had worked at the approved service facility for 3 years with an excellent record, had been approached by someone claiming to represent a private security company interested in testing new anti-theft devices. The payments offered were substantial enough to overcome his initial hesitation, and he had been gradually drawn into installing increasingly sophisticated surveillance equipment. Back at Thames House, interrogation specialist Detective Chief Inspector Amanda Foster was conducting a careful interview with Hartley. The technician appeared genuinely shocked to learn that he had been working for Russian intelligence, insisting that he believed he was helping to test security systems that would eventually be used to protect important government officials. "They told me the equipment was designed to detect vulnerabilities in vehicle security," Hartley explained during one of the recorded sessions. "They said the royal vehicles were chosen because they represented the highest security standards, and if the devices could be detected in those cars, they would need to be improved before being deployed to protect other officials." Foster recognized the classic patterns of intelligence recruitment. Hartley had been carefully manipulated, starting with what seemed like legitimate security work and gradually being drawn into activities he didn't fully understand. The Russian operatives had exploited his technical expertise while keeping him unaware of the true purpose of his actions. The investigation had also uncovered evidence that the BMW surveillance device was not an isolated incident. Technical analysis revealed that similar devices had been planted in vehicles belonging to several other high-profile government officials, including cabinet ministers involved in trade negotiations and defense officials working on NATO cooperation initiatives. Dr. Chen's team had been working to understand the full scope of the surveillance network. "We've identified at least 12 other vehicles that appeared to have been compromised using similar techniques," she reported during the daily briefing. "The operation appears to have been running for at least 8 months, targeting officials involved in trade negotiations, defense planning, and diplomatic initiatives." The scope of the Russian intelligence operation was becoming clear, and it represented one of the most sophisticated surveillance efforts against British officials in recent memory. The use of automotive technicians to plant devices during routine service visits was particularly clever, as it provided legitimate access to secure vehicles without raising immediate suspicion. Prince William participated in another emergency briefing via secure video link from Kensington Palace. The investigation had reached a point where decisions needed to be made about how to respond to what was clearly a significant intelligence breach by a hostile foreign power. "The question we're facing," explained Blackwood, "is whether to make this public or handle it through diplomatic channels. Going public would expose the extent of the Russian operation and potentially deter similar activities, but it would also reveal our counterintelligence capabilities and methods." William understood the complexities involved. Making the surveillance operation public would inevitably lead to media attention and public concern about the security of the royal family. It could also complicate ongoing diplomatic relationships and intelligence cooperation with allied nations who might question the effectiveness of British security services. Foreign Secretary Jennifer Morrison joined the briefing to discuss the diplomatic implications. "We've been in contact with our allies about this situation, and there's strong support for a coordinated response that exposes Russian intelligence activities while protecting our ongoing operations." Several other NATO countries have discovered similar surveillance operations targeting their officials. Investigation was revealing that the surveillance of Prince William's vehicle was part of a much larger intelligence operation that had implications far beyond royal security. Russian intelligence services had been systematically targeting Western officials involved in trade negotiations, defense planning, and diplomatic initiatives, gathering information that could provide significant advantages in international negotiations. As the briefing concluded, William realized that what had started as the discovery of a simple surveillance device had uncovered a major threat to British national security. The quiet Tuesday morning when Sarah Matthews had found the device in his glove compartment had led to the exposure of one of the most significant foreign intelligence operations against Britain in recent years. 2 weeks into the investigation, implications of the surveillance operation had grown far beyond what anyone initially imagined. In a secure conference room at the Cabinet Office, Prime Minister's representatives met with senior intelligence officials to discuss a response that would need to balance national security concerns with diplomatic considerations and public transparency. Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews had been temporarily assigned to a joint task force between MI5, the Metropolitan Police, and GCHQ. Her role in discovering the original surveillance device had made her a key figure in understanding how the Russian operation had been able to penetrate royal security so effectively. She now found herself briefing senior government officials on security vulnerabilities that had implications for protecting all high-level government figures. Our analysis shows that the Russians identified a systematic weakness in how we handle vehicle maintenance for protected officials. Sarah explained to the assembled group. By recruiting automotive technicians at approved service facilities, they gained legitimate access to vehicles without triggering our standard security protocols. The revelation had forced a complete review of security procedures for all government vehicles. It had become clear that the focus on protecting officials during travel had overlooked the vulnerability created during routine maintenance and servicing. The Russians had exploited this gap with considerable skill and patience. Meanwhile, the forensic analysis of the surveillance, the device found in Prince William's car, had revealed disturbing details about the scope of information that had been compromised. Dr. Chen and her team had finally succeeded in partially decrypting some of the transmitted data, providing the first concrete evidence of what the Russian intelligence services had been able to gather. The intercepted conversations include detailed discussions about upcoming trade delegations, security arrangements for state visits, private assessments of international leaders, Dr. Chen reported during a classified briefing. In one particularly concerning case, they recorded a conversation where Prince William was briefed on sensitive intelligence about Russian military activities near NATO borders. The implications were staggering. The Russians had not only violated the privacy of the royal family, but had gained access to classified information that could compromise British intelligence sources and methods. The surveillance operation had been far more successful than anyone had initially realized in Moscow. Russian intelligence officials were dealing with their own crisis as news of the exposed operation reached the highest levels of government. The SVR had invested considerable resources in developing the surveillance network, and its exposure represented a significant intelligence failure that would require explanation. 2 senior officials who had been counting on the intelligence gathered from British government vehicles, Colonel Viktor Petrov, who had overseen the British surveillance operation from Moscow, found himself explaining to his superiors how what should have been a routine intelligence gathering operation had unraveled so quickly. The discovery was accidental, he reported during a tense briefing at SVR headquarters. Our technical assessment suggested that the devices would remain undetected for at least 6 months, possibly longer. The Russian operation had been carefully planned over more than a year. Intelligence officers had identified automotive technicians who worked at facilities approved for servicing government vehicles, gradually recruiting them through a combination of financial incentives and carefully crafted cover stories. Thomas Hartley had been just one of several technicians who had been manipulated into installing surveillance equipment without understanding its true purpose. Back in London, the investigation had uncovered evidence that the surveillance network extended to vehicles belonging to cabinet ministers, senior military officials, and intelligence service leaders. The scope of the Russian operation was unprecedented in its ambition and sophistication. Foreign Secretary Jennifer Morrison was coordinating with allies to develop a coordinated response to what was being recognized as one of the most significant intelligence breaches in recent memory. We've confirmed that similar operations have been discovered in France, Germany, and Canada, she reported during a classified briefing. The Russians appear to have been running parallel surveillance operations against senior officials across the NATO alliance. The international scope of the Russian surveillance activities had transformed what began as a security incident involving Prince William into a major diplomatic crisis. Allied intelligence services were sharing information about similar discoveries, revealing a pattern of systematic surveillance that had been gathering sensitive information across multiple countries. Prince William participated in another secure briefing from Kensington Palace, where he learned about the broader implications of the surveillance operation. The device found in his car had been just one component of a much larger intelligence gathering effort that had implications for British national security and international relations. The question we're facing now, explained MI5 Director General Sir James Patterson, is how to respond in a way that protects our ongoing intelligence operations while making it clear that this level of surveillance activity against senior officials will not be tolerated. Diplomatic response was being carefully coordinated with allies, rather than handle the matter quietly through traditional intelligence channels. There was growing support for a public response that would expose the extent of Russian surveillance activities and deter similar operations in the future. Catherine had been briefed separately about the expanding investigation and its implications for their family's security. The knowledge that foreign intelligence services had been systematically targeting senior British officials, including her husband, had reinforced her understanding of the serious security threats facing the royal family. The security review has identified numerous improvements we need to make, William explained to Catherine during one of their private conversations. But the experts are confident that we can prevent this type of surveillance from happening again. The investigation had revealed that the Russian intelligence operation had been gathering information for months before its discovery, but it had also demonstrated the effectiveness of British counterintelligence capabilities once the threat had been identified. The cooperation between different agencies had been exemplary, and the speed with which the surveillance network had been mapped and disrupted had impressed international partners. Dr. Chen's technical team had developed new detection systems that could identify unauthorized electronic devices in vehicles much more quickly than previous methods. These systems were being installed in all government vehicles and would provide ongoing protection against similar surveillance attempts. As the investigation moved toward its conclusion, it was becoming clear that the accidental discovery of the surveillance device in Prince William's glove compartment had prevented a much larger intelligence disaster. The Russian operation had been on the verge of expanding to include surveillance of additional targets, including members of parliament and senior civil servants involved in sensitive government work. The quiet Tuesday morning, when Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews had discovered the device during a routine fuel stop, had ultimately led to the exposure and disruption of one of the most sophisticated foreign surveillance operations ever discovered against British officials. 6 months later, the repercussions of the surveillance discovery continued to reshape British security protocols and international intelligence cooperation. In a secure briefing room beneath Whitehall, Senior officials gathered to review the final report on what had become known within intelligence circles as Operation Glovebox. Named after the location where Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews had made her crucial discovery. The investigation had ultimately identified a Russian surveillance network that had compromised vehicles belonging to four senior British officials, including cabinet ministers, military leaders, intelligence officers, and members of the royal family. The scope of the operation had been unprecedented, representing the most significant intelligence breach on British soil since the Cold War. Prime Minister David Cameron received the final briefing on the operation's conclusion. The surveillance network has been completely dismantled, reported MI5 Director General Sir James Patterson. We've identified and removed surveillance devices from all compromised vehicles, implemented new security protocols for government transportation, and disrupted the Russian intelligence operation responsible. Diplomatic response had been carefully calibrated to send a clear message while avoiding escalation that could harm other international relationships. Britain had expelled 12 Russian intelligence officers operating under diplomatic cover, imposed sanctions on individuals and organizations involved in the surveillance operation, and shared intelligence about Russian methods with NATO allies to help prevent similar operations. Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews found herself in the unusual position of receiving commendation from both the Metropolitan Police and MI5 for her role in uncovering the surveillance operation. Her attention to detail during what should have been a routine fuel stop had prevented a much larger intelligence disaster and led to the exposure of a major threat to national security. Your discovery changed everything. MI5 Section Head David Blackwood told Sarah during a private meeting at Thames House, and without your alertness that morning, this operation could have continued for months or years, gathering intelligence that could have compromised British interests across multiple areas of government. It's Sarah.